a very courageous life. She also left a huge impact on women that has continued to leave its mark. For instance, in this last presidential election, a woman named Hillary Clinton ran for president. Amelia grew up in a time when women were thought to be just housewives and people with small jobs. Cooking, cleaning, and teaching were some of the most primary jobs. During Amelia's childhood, there were many important events, but the most important was the raging destruction of World War I. Amelia was born in Atchison, Kansas on July 24, 1897. She was born to Mr. Edwin and Amy Earhart and made a big sister to Muriel. Born in her grandparents' house, she grew up rarely seeing her father. Edwin worked with a railroad company and often had to go away on business trips for many weeks at a time, sometimes taking Amy with him. Usually without her parents, Amelia grew up doing things that were thought to be rude and unladylike. Usually running around in jumpsuits with bloomer bottoms, her childhood was filled with good times. In the winter of 1904, Amelia was belly flopping, the tomboy way of sledding, when she got the idea to get a running start. As she picked up speed, a horse-drawn carriage came down the road. When the driver stopped right in her way, trying to back up, Amelia raced under the horse's belly. If she would have been sitting on the sled like usual, she would have most probably died from the impact of the horse's ribs. To celebrate Amelia's 11th birthday, Edwin took the family to see the Iowa State Fair. While there, Amelia got to see her first airplane. It was made of wire and old wood. Amelia later said that she was more interested in a cheap hat that she had just bought. In 1917, Amelia joined the Red Cross. She became a nurse helping at the Spad Military Hospital in Canada. She stayed at the hospital until shortly after the war ended on November 11, 1918. She would later say, "I believe it was in the winter of 1918 that I became interested in airplanes. Though I had seen one or two at county fairs before, I now saw many of them, as the officers were trained at the various fields around the city. I hung around in spare time and absorbed all I could. I remember well that when the snow blown back by the propellers stung my face, I felt a first urge to fly." Although most pilots were men, a few were women. As Amelia took lessons from Netta Snook, she went to the bold short hair look of the 20s. During lessons, she also stopped wearing dresses and started wearing slacks. On July 24, 1922, Amelia's 25th birthday, she bought a plane built by Burt Kenner. Originally a one-seater but changed into a two-seater after a crash, it was a three-cylinder, 17-foot wingspan, 60-horsepower plane that she painted yellow and was named the Canary. While Amelia still owned her Canary, she entered an air show and would attempt to rise to 14,000 feet. As she rose to that altitude, her engine froze with ice and caused her to land unharmed. Shortly after the famed trip made by Charles Lindbergh with the flight across the Atlantic in the spirit of St. Louis, Amy Phipps Guest wanted to sponsor a trip across the Atlantic with one exception. She wanted the pilot to be a woman. George P. Putnam led the search for the quest. He chose Amelia Earhart, and at age 31, Amelia was overjoyed. On June 17, 1928, the Friendship took off from Ackfoundland for a 20-hour, 40-minute flight across the Atlantic that would end in Buryport, Wales. In 1929, Amelia came third in the first all-women's air derby. Also in 1929, Amelia formed the 99s, a women's pilot group named after the number of its first members. Amelia was chosen as the first president. On April 8, 1931, Amelia was the first one to fly over 18,000 feet in an autogyro. In 1931, George Putnam, the same man that found Amelia for the flight across the Atlantic, asked Amelia to marry him, and she accepted. Sadly, on July 2, 1937, Amelia Earhart was lost when she attempted a round-world flight. After planning to refuel at Howland Island, she set off with Fred Noonan, the navigator, and was to meet with the Coast Guard gunner, the Itasca. After several requests for bearings from Amelia and several answers from the crew, she reported hearing the replies. Less than an hour later, the message came over the radio, listening on 6210 kilocycles. We are running north and south. No other signal was heard, and a giant sea and air rescue was attempted, but no traces have ever been found. Although Amelia is gone, her legacy is still clearly seen today, as women push beyond previously existing boundaries to achieve new heights in all that they do.
Radio position to say that all was well, although the fuel inside her tank was low. She'd stop on Howland Island and refuel that monoplane, and on her trip around the world she'd go. And it's a beautiful, beautiful field, far away in a land that is fair. Happy landings to you, Amelia Earhart. Farewell for First Lady of the Air.